Hey Planeswalkers, this is Eric from Bane Alley Magic bringing you yet another deck tech video. I've been doing a lot of them lately, and today we are talking about Nevinyrral Urborg Tyrant. So this is 3 and Esper colors, that's white, blue, black, for a 3/6 zombie wizard. It has hexproof from artifacts, creatures, and enchantments, and when it enters the battlefield, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token for each creature that died this turn, and when it dies, you may pay 1, and if you do, destroy all artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. So this is a throwback to a very old card, Nevinyrral's Disc, that was printed originally in the Alpha set. So the very first set ever had Nevinyrral's Disc. You can see the disc right there on his chest, and the disc just says you can pay 1 and tap it and destroy all artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. So there are lots of ways you could build this deck. The way I've decided to build it is Super Friends, because the only thing that Nevinyrral doesn't destroy are lands and planeswalkers. So I think Nevinyrral is the perfect commander for a Super Friends deck, because planeswalkers want to be destroying creatures, right? If they don't destroy creatures, then the creatures are going to kill them in combat. Planeswalker themed decks, they got a lot of board wipes, so what better way than to have a board wipe right on our commander? And so, looking at the numbers of the deck,
we only have 14 cards that are creatures or cards that make creatures, including Nevinyrral himself. But again, the main theme of the deck is planeswalkers, so we don't want to be having a bunch of creatures on the battlefield. We actually want to play a bunch of board wipes. So we have 25 planeswalkers in the deck, 18 cards that give us card advantage, 15 ramp spells.
And look at this, 26 cards that can act like removal.
I only have 1 counter spell in the entire deck. Maybe that number could go up higher, maybe I could go down some removal, I guess, I don't know. But only 1 counter spell and 36 lands.
So the cool trick you can do with Nevinyrral is when it enters the battlefield, its enter the battlefield trigger is going to go on the stack. And while it's on the stack, you then sacrifice Nevinyrral to something and pay 1, so you destroy all artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. So when his ability resolves, it's going to make even more zombie tokens. The last thing I'd like to say before we start is, if you do have a chance, please hit that like button. I'd really appreciate it. I'm not making money for making these videos, I'm just doing it for fun, but seeing that people like my videos is a great inspiration for me to keep making more. So please hit that like button if you can. So since Nevinyrral gets kind of tricky with sacrifice outlets, I'm going to start with the sacrifice outlets, starting with Phyrexian Altar, 3 mana for an artifact, sacrifice a creature, and add 1 mana of any color. This card actually all by itself can go infinite with Nevinyrral, and I'll show you how that works. So step 1, at least 7 creatures have to die. Then you cast Nevinyrral and make 7 zombie tokens. Step 3, you sacrifice zombie tokens and Nevinyrral to Phyrexian Altar, making 8 mana. Step 4, recast Nevinyrral with the mana you made from Phyrexian Altar. This time you're going to make 15 zombie tokens, and then you just repeat steps 3 and 4, and then you're going to get 16 mana and 31 zombies. And then you do it again, and you end up with just more and more mana, more and more zombies. It's infinite mana and infinite zombies. So that's one way you can just win the game there. Of course, they don't have haste, so you'll have to wait 1 turn before you can actually close the game out. Next is Ashnod's Altar, 3 mana for an artifact, sacrifice a creature, add 2 colorless mana to your mana pool. So Ashnod's Altar also goes infinite with Nim Deathmantle. I didn't include that in this deck, but you could very easily. Next is Culling Dais, 2 mana for an artifact that says you can tap and sacrifice a creature to put a charge counter on it, and for 1 you can sacrifice it to draw a card for each counter that's on it. So I think this is actually a really great way to draw cards, especially in any decks that want to be sacrificing their creatures. Next is Vampiric Rites, 1 black for an enchantment. You pay 1 and a black and sacrifice a creature, you gain 1 life and draw a card. And next is Village Rites, 1 black for an instant. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature and draw 2 cards. So I like Village Rites. It can be used at instant speed to sacrifice Nevinyrral before his enter the battlefield trigger resolves. Another thing I want to say real quick, which is kind of obvious, but any permanents that are in the deck, they all get blown up when Nevinyrral blows up everything. So, you know, your artifacts and enchantments, they're not going to last if you blow up everything with Nev. Alright, next we have some lands that we can use to sacrifice Nev. We got High Market. It taps to add a colorless, or you can tap it and sacrifice a creature to gain 1 life. Phyrexian Tower. It taps to add colorless, or you can tap it and sacrifice a creature to add 2 black mana. Next is Diamond Valley, which is only $422, but you can proxy it, right? So it taps and you can sacrifice a creature, you gain life equal to the sacrificed creature's toughness. This doesn't even tap for mana, so honestly the other options are better, but it's out there. Next is Mirren the Moaning Well. It taps for colorless, or you can pay 3 and tap it and sacrifice a creature, and you gain life equal to the sacrificed creature's toughness. And as I mentioned before, we do have 1 counter spell in the deck. It's Counterspell, 2 blue, counter a spell. Alright, so let's talk about the Planeswalkers, starting with the Liliana Planeswalkers. I feel like she goes best with Nevinyrral because she likes zombies. So Liliana the Last Hope is 1 and 2 black for a Planeswalker that enters with 3 loyalty. For +1, up to 1 target creature gets -2, -1 until your next turn. For -2, put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard, and then you may return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. -7, you get an emblem with, at the beginning of your end step, put X 2/2 black zombie creature tokens onto the battlefield, where X is the number of zombies you control. So this is in here purely for that last ability to just get more and more zombies, but of course using that first ability to kill a creature once in a while is pretty cool. Next is Liliana Dreadhorde General, 4 and 2 black. She enters with 6 loyalty counters. She says whenever a creature you control dies, draw a card. For +1, create a 2/2 zombie creature token. -4, each player sacrifices 2 creatures. And for -9, each opponent chooses a permanent they control of each permanent type and sacrifices the rest. So this last ability basically says all of your opponents lose the game. Completely. Like, there's pretty much no coming back from that. And we do have many Planeswalkers in the deck that if they ultimate, we could win the game. Next is Liliana Death's Mastery, 3 and 2 black. She enters with 5 loyalty. +1, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. -3, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. That creature is a black zombie in addition to its other colors and types. And -7, destroy all non-zombie creatures. So this makes more zombies, and it can eventually be a board wipe. Next is Liliana Vest, 3 and 2 black. She enters with 5 loyalty. +1, target player discards a card. -2, search your library for a card and shuffle your library and put that card on top of it. And -8, put all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield under your control. So that -8 ability is just like Rise of the Dark Realms. That can definitely win you the game all by itself, but it's going to be hard to get there because very often we're going to be using that -2 ability a couple of times to just tutor up whatever cards we want. But if we're lucky, we can use that -8 ability. Next is Ugin the Spirit Dragon, 8 generic mana. It enters with 7 loyalty. For +2, Ugin deals 3 damage to any target. -X, exile each permanent with converted mana cost X or less, that's 1 or more colors. And -10, you gain 7 life, draw 7 cards, then put up to 7 permanents from your hand onto the battlefield. So this is mostly in here for that -X ability to exile everything that's a threat, but of course that's going to exile our own things as well. So a lot of the times I will do just that plus ability to just zap off individual targets. Next we have some Jace Planeswalkers. Jace, Unraveler of Secrets, 3 and 2 blue, enters with 5 loyalty. +1, scry 1 and then draw a card. -2, return target creature to its owner's hand. -8, you get an emblem with whenever an opponent casts his or her first spell each turn, counter that spell. So that emblem is going to shut a couple of players out of the game for sure. Next is Jace, Architect of Thought, 2 and 2 blue, enters with 4 loyalty. For +1, until your next turn, whenever a creature an opponent controls attacks, it gets -1/-0 until end of turn. For -2, reveal the top 3 cards of your library. An opponent separates those cards into 2 piles. Put 1 pile into your hand and the other on the bottom of your library in any order. -8, for each player, search that player's library for a non-land card and exile it. Then that player shuffles their library. You may cast those cards without paying their mana costs. So, that first ability, giving all of your opponent's creatures -1/-0 every time they attack, is a great way to protect our Planeswalkers. -2 ability gets us more cards in our hand, and that -8 ability can hopefully just win us the game by getting the best spells out of our opponent's decks. Next is Jace the Mind Sculptor, 2 and 2 blue, enters with 3 loyalty. For +2, look at the top card of target player's library, and you may put that card on the bottom of that player's library. For 0, draw 3 cards, then put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library in any order. -1, return target creature to its owner's hand, and -12, exile all cards from target player's library, then that player shuffles their hand into their library. So the -12 ability definitely takes just one player completely out of the game, exiling almost their entire library. -1 to just bounce something. The 0 ability is great for getting extra cards in your hand, and the +2 ability is basically like you're scrying on anyone's deck. I love that. Next is Teferi, Master of Time, 2 and 2 blue, enters with 3 loyalty counters. You may activate loyalty abilities of Teferi, Master of Time on any player's turn anytime you could cast an instant. So just every single turn you get to do one of these at instant speed. +1, draw a card and then discard a card. -3, target creature you don't control phases out. That means you treat it and anything attached to it as though it doesn't exist until its controller's next turn. And for -10, you take 2 extra turns after this one. So because you can plus Teferi on everyone else's turn, you can get to that -10 ability really quickly. Next is Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, 3, a white and a blue, enters with 4 loyalty. For +1, draw a card, and at the beginning of the next end step, untap 2 lands. -3, put target non-land permanent into its owner's library, 3rd from the top. And -8, you get an emblem with whenever you draw a card, exile targeted permanent and opponent controls. So we got draw, we got ramp, we got removal, and the ultimate ability is like super removal. Awesome. Next we have Gideon, Ally of Zendikar, 2 and 2 white, enters with 4 loyalty. For +1, until end of turn, it becomes a 5/5 human soldier ally creature with indestructible that's still a planeswalker, and you prevent all damage that would be dealt to him this turn. For 0, you put a 2/2 white knight ally creature token onto the battlefield. For -4, you get an emblem with creatures you control get +1/+1. So we're probably not going to be using that -4 ability very much. Mostly this is in here for that 0 ability to just keep pumping out 2/2 knight creature tokens that can block for our planeswalkers. Next is Karn, Scion of Urza, 4 mana, enters with 5 loyalty. For +1, reveal the top 2 cards of your library. An opponent chooses one of them, put that card into your hand, and exile the other with a silver counter on it. For -1, put a card you own with a silver counter on it from exile into your hand. And for -2, you create a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token with this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. So this is card advantage, and it can make creature tokens. Next is Dovin, Hand of Control, 2 and a hybrid blue-white, enters with 5 loyalty counters. Artifacts, instants, and sorcery spells your opponents control are 2 more to cast. That's pretty awesome. And for -1, until your next turn, prevent all damage that would be dealt to and by target permanent and opponent controls. So this slows our opponents down, and it prevents the damage that their most threatening permanent is going to deal. Next is Venser, the Sojourner, 3, a white and a blue, enters with 3 loyalty. For +2, exile targeted permanent you own, return it to the battlefield under your control at the beginning of the next end step. -1, creatures are unblockable this turn, and -8, you get an emblem with whenever you cast a spell, exile target permanent. So that last ability is definitely a game-winning effect. If we can cast enough spells, we're just going to be exiling all of our opponent's most important permanents. The -1 ability we might not be using very much, but it does come up a lot of the time. Giving our creatures unblockable is a great way to close out the game. And for +2, if your opponent gains control of something you own, you can get it back under your control. And also, you can bounce your planeswalkers with this to reset their loyalty. Next we have Tevesh Zot, Doom of Fools, 4 and a black, enters with 4 loyalty. For +2, you create 2 0/1 black Thrall creature tokens. So that is great, making creature tokens every single turn. +1, you may sacrifice another creature or planeswalker. If you do, draw 2 cards. Then draw another card if the sacrificed permanent was a commander. So if you sacrifice Nevinyrral with this, you're going to be drawing 3 cards. And for -10, gain control of all commanders. Put all commanders from the command zone onto the battlefield under your control. Definitely a game-winning effect right there. Next is Elspeth, Knight Errant, 2 and 2 white, enters with 4 loyalty. For +1, you make a 1/1 white soldier creature token. For +1, target creature gets +3/+3 and gains flying until end of turn. And for -8, you get an emblem with artifacts, creatures, enchantments, and lands you control are indestructible. That emblem would be fabulous to get to with Nevinyrral, because then we can activate Nevinyrral and none of our stuff gets destroyed. But yeah, just pumping out a bunch of creature tokens every turn, very important. Next is Elspeth, Sun's Champion, 4 and 2 white, enters with 4 loyalty counters. For +1, you put 3 1/1 white soldier creature tokens onto the battlefield. That is just insane. -3, destroy all creatures with power 4 or greater, just what any Planeswalker deck wants. And for -7, you get an emblem with creatures you control get +2/+2 and have flying. Next is Narset, Transcendent, 2 a white and a blue, enters with 6 loyalty. For +1, look at the top card of your library. If it's a non-creature, non-land card, you may reveal it and put it into your hand. For -2, when you cast your next instant or sorcery spell from your hand this turn, it gains Rebound. And for -9, you get an emblem with your opponents can't cast non-creature spells. So that emblem is definitely going to lock some people out of the game. The -2 ability usually doesn't apply because we don't have many spells that we care about having Rebound. But yeah, that +1 ability can get us more Planeswalkers in our hand for sure. Next is Narset, Parter of Veils, 1 and 2 blue, enters with 5 loyalty. Each opponent can't draw more than 1 card each turn. And for -2, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a non-creature, non-land card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So yeah, card advantage for you and taking it away from everyone else. Next is Tamiyo the Moon Sage, 3 and 2 blue, enters with 4 loyalty. For +1, tap target permanent. It doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. -2, draw a card for each tapped creature target player controls. And -8, you get an emblem with, you have no maximum hand size, and whenever a card is put into your graveyard from anywhere, you may return it to your hand. The -2 ability on here can draw us a ton of cards. The +1 ability can get rid of whatever the biggest threat is on the battlefield. And of course that -8 ability just means our Planeswalkers are never going to go away. Next is Ob Nixilis, Reignited, 3 and 2 black, enters with 5 loyalty. For +1, you draw a card and lose 1 life. -3, destroy target creature, and -8, target opponent gets an emblem with, whenever a player draws a card, you lose 2 life. Next is Kazmina, Enigmatic Mentor, 3 and a blue, enters with 5 loyalty. Spells your opponents cast that target a creature or planeswalker you control cost 2 more to cast. And for -2, create a 2/2 blue wizard creature token, draw a card, and then discard a card. So this lets us dig through our deck and make tokens that can block for our planeswalkers, and it just protects our planeswalkers in general. Next we have Sorin, Grim Nemesis, 4 a white and a black, enters with 6 loyalty. For +1, reveal the top card of your library and then put that card into your hand. Each opponent loses life equal to its converted mana cost. For -X, Sorin deals X damage to target creature or planeswalker, and you gain X life. And for -9, put a number of 1/1 Black Vampire Knight creature tokens with lifelink onto the battlefield equal to the highest life total among all players. So that last ability is definitely game winning. You can get you so many vampire creature tokens, and yeah, that +1 ability is a straight card advantage and draining your opponents of life. Next is Tezzeret, Artifice Master, 3 and 2 blue, enters with 5 loyalty. For +1, create a 1/1 Thopter artifact creature token with flying. For 0, you draw a card, and if you control 3 or more artifacts, you draw 2 cards instead. And for -9, you get an emblem with, at the beginning of your end step, search your library for a permanent card, put it onto the battlefield, and then shuffle your library. Obviously that last ability is just fabulous. The +1 ability, getting us blockers, exactly what we want, and the 0 ability, drawing us more cards. Next is Ashiok, Dream Render, 1 and 2 hybrid, blue-black, enters with 5 loyalty. It says spells and abilities your opponents control can't cause their controllers to search their library. So your opponents can't crack their fetch lands, they can't tutor for anything at all. For -1, target player puts the top 4 cards of their library into their graveyard and then exile each opponent's graveyard. Alright, so that's it for the Planeswalkers. Now for some creatures, or at least spells that make some creatures. Orzhov Advocist, 2 and a white, for a 1/4 Human Advisor. At the beginning of your upkeep, each player may put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature they control. If that player does, Creatures that player controls can't attack you or a planeswalker you control until your next turn. So this is a nice way to incentivize your opponents to not attack you, at least for one turn. Next is Baird, Steward of Argive, 2 and 2 white for a 2/4 human soldier with vigilance, and creatures can't attack you or a planeswalker you control unless their controller pays 1 for each of those creatures. Next is Emeria's Call, 4 and 3 white for a sorcery. It says create 2 4/4 white angel creature tokens with flying. Non-angel creatures you control gain indestructible until your next turn. Or you can choose to have this enter as a land that enters tapped unless you pay 3 life. So giving your non-angel creatures indestructible is pretty good with Nevinyrral. Next is Yawgmoth Thran Physician, 2 and 2 black for a 2/4 human cleric. It has protection from humans. You can pay 1 life and sacrifice another creature to put a -1/-1 counter on up to 1 target creature and draw a card. And for 2 black, you can discard a card to proliferate. Discard a card to proliferate. That's it. So as long as you have a bunch of cards in your hand and a bunch of black mana, Yawgmoth makes it so you can ultimate a bunch of your planeswalkers right away. That is definitely game ending. Flux Channeler is 2 and a blue for a 2/2 human wizard. Whenever you cast any non-creature spell, proliferate. So every time you cast a planeswalker, you're going to proliferate. Next we have Magus of the Disc, 2 and 2 white for a 2/4 human wizard. It enters the battlefield tapped, and for 1 and tapping it, destroy all artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. So this is a board wipe on a creature. It's a throwback to Nevinyrral's Disc. So I had to include this in the deck, and Nevinyrral loves this. And that being said, I guess we'll get into the removal. Pongify is 1 blue for an instant. Destroy target creature. It can't be regenerated. Its controller creates a 3/3 green ape creature token. Now, yes, I could have included Swords to Plowshares in the deck, but when creatures are exiled, Nevinyrral doesn't make more zombies off of that. He only makes zombies for creatures dying, so that's why I did Pongify instead of Swords to Plowshares and Path to Exile. Same with Rapid Hybridization. 1 blue for an instant. Destroy target creature. It can't be regenerated. Its controller creates a 3/3 green frog lizard creature token. Next is Hagra Mauling, 2 and 2 black for an instant. It costs 1 less to cast if an opponent controls no basic lands, and destroy target creature, or you can choose to have this enter as a tapped land. And then of course we have to have Nevinyrral's Disc, 4 mana, and enters the battlefield tapped, and you can pay 1 and tap it to destroy all creatures, artifacts, and enchantments. Next is Bontu's Last Reckoning, 1 and 2 black for a sorcery. Destroy all creatures. Lands you control don't untap during your next untap step. So it does suck that your lands aren't going to untap, but it is only 3 mana to cast, and so I like that. Next is Settle the Wreckage, 2 and 2 white for an instant. Exile all attacking creatures target player controls. That player may search his or her library for that many basic land cards, put those cards onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle his or her library. So this is one of our 2 massive exile spells in the deck. Sometimes we do need to exile things, and this prevents opponents from just winning the game out of nowhere with things like Craterhoof Behemoth. Next is Time Wipe, 2 white and a blue for a sorcery. Return target creature you control to its owner's hand, and then destroy all creatures. So bouncing Nevinyrral back to our hand is really great. Another thing that lots of people do in this deck is they have a lot of ways to bounce Nevinyrral and recast him. I didn't do anything like that. I instead just included a bunch of board wipes. Next we have Supreme Verdict, 1 2 white and a blue. It can't be countered, and destroy all creatures. Next is Evacuation, 3 and 2 blue for an instant. Return all creatures to their owner's hands. Instant speed, very nice. Next is Austere Command, 4 and 2 white. It says choose 2. Destroy all artifacts, destroy all enchantments, destroy all creatures with converted mana cost 3 or less, or destroy all creatures with converted mana cost 4 or greater. So your choice. Next is Toxic Deluge, 2 and a black. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you have to pay X life, and all creatures get -X/-X until end of turn. So a very cheap board wipe that can even kill indestructible creatures. Next is Hour of Revelation, 3 and 3 white for a sorcery. This spell costs 3 less to cast if there are 10 or more non-land permanents on the battlefield, and it says destroy all non-land permanents. So unfortunately this will destroy all of our planeswalkers as well, but maybe if our opponents are playing planeswalkers, we might have to have a way to get rid rid of our opponent's Planeswalkers. You know, gotta have at least 1 or 2 ways to kill Planeswalkers in the deck. Next is Akroma's Vengeance, 4 and 2 white, destroy all artifacts, creatures, and enchantments, and it has cycling for 3, so for 3 mana you can discard it and draw a different card if you already have plenty of board wipes in your hand already. Next is Merciless Eviction, 4 a white and a black for a sorcery. Choose 1, exile all artifacts, creatures, enchantments, or Planeswalkers. Your choice. Next is Cyclonic Rift, 1 and a blue for an instant. Return target non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand, or instead you can pay 7 mana, 6 and a blue, to return all non-land permanents you don't control to their owner's hands. What I like to do with the instant speed bounce spells is wait until my opponent's end step, so they have to return everything to their hand and then they have to discard down to 7. I love doing that. Alright, so now we got some other spells that didn't really have a place. Surprisingly, I don't have any other draw card spells except for Seagate, Restoration, and the Planeswalkers. Just almost all of our Planeswalkers equal the card draw by themselves. So Seagate, Restoration, 4 and 3 blue for a sorcery. Draw cards equal to the number of cards in your hand plus 1. You have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game, or instead you can choose to have this enter as a land that enters tapped unless you pay 3 life. Next is Gift of Immortality, 2 and a white for an enchantment aura. When enchanted creature dies, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. Return Gift of Immortality to the battlefield attached to that creature at the beginning of the next end step. So this is perfect with Nevinyrral, making sure that we can just keep using him over and over again, basically every turn. It's awesome. Next is Malakir Rebirth, 1 black for an instant. Choose target creature, you lose 2 life. Until end of turn, that creature gains. When this creature dies, return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. And also you have the option of having this enter as a tapped land. So again, we're just using this to get extra value off of Nevinyrral. Next is Bane Veil, 1 and a blue for an instant. Creatures your opponents control get -2/-0 until end of turn, or you can choose to have this enter as a tapped land. So giving your opponent's creatures -2/-0 is a great way to protect your Planeswalkers for a turn. Of course, we gotta have some ramp, so of course we have Soul Ring, we have all of the signets, we even have Star Compass, which is like a signet except it enters the battlefield tapped. Then we got Land Tax, 1 white for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, if an opponent controls more lands than you, you may search your library for 3 basic land cards, reveal them, and put them into your hand, and then shuffle your library. So this isn't exactly ramp, it's more like card draw. The lands go into your hand. I do use this every single turn I can, even if it means I'm going to be discarding lands. It does mean that I'm going to be thinning my deck, and so that lowers the chance that the next card I draw is going to be a land. And it's just great to know that you're going to be hitting a land every single turn. Next is Smothering Tithe, 3 and a white for an enchantment. Whenever an opponent draws a card, that player may pay 2. If they don't, you make a treasure token. So if somebody wheels, you could make up to 21 treasures with this. Very awesome card, goes in any white deck for sure. Next is Dark Ritual, 1 black. For an instant, you add 3 black mana to your mana pool. So yeah, turn 1, you can play something that's converted mana cost 3. That's not bad. Next we have Cabal Ritual, 1 and a black. For an instant, add 3 black mana to your mana pool. However, if you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard, you add 5 black mana to your mana pool instead. Next is Treasure Map. For 2 mana, you get an artifact that says you can pay 1 and tap it to scry 1. Then you put a landmark counter on Treasure Map. Then, if there are 3 or more landmark counters on it, remove those counters, transform Treasure Map, and create 3 treasure tokens. And it transforms into Treasure Cove, which taps for colorless mana, or you can tap it and sacrifice a treasure to draw a card. So, scrying 1 every turn is really great, just being able to dig through your deck for the exact cards that you want, and eventually this turns into a land that you can tap for mana, or that you can tap to actually draw cards. It's pretty nice. Next is Thematic Compass, 2 mana for an artifact. It says you can pay 3 and tap it to search your library for a basic land card, reveal it and put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library. And at the beginning of your end step, if you control 7 or more lands, it transforms into Spires of Orazca, a land that taps for colorless, or you can tap it to untap target attacking creature an opponent controls and remove it from combat. So Thematic Compass is another way that we can make sure we're hitting our land drops every turn, and once we have 7 mana, we have a way to remove our opponent's most problematic creatures from combat. And that's pretty much it. And then we have 36 lands, and that's the deck. The only other land that's worth mentioning is Karn's Bastion. You can tap it for colorless, or you can pay 4 and tap it to proliferate to make sure you ultimate your Planeswalkers faster than you could before. So that's my Nevinyrral Urborg Tyrant Super Friends deck. So let me know what you think in the comments, and hey, if you like this video, please hit that like button. I'd really appreciate it. This is Eric from Bane Alley Magic signing off. Until next time, take care, take it easy.